my story actually begins during the super predator era, which is mid to late 90s. Um, my parents had just had a divorce, and my family of eight was shattered. While a lot of my siblings went with friends, I went with my mom to a trailer park. At the same time, she was actually falling into severe alcoholism and a bulimic, which translated to empty cabinets, if not for alcohol. Vodka was her choice. Um, this also at the same time, I was taken out of a private school where I was on many sports teams and put in a public school where I made no sports teams. And because it was sixth grade year, as it were, a lot of the cliques were already formed that I couldn't penetrate. So suddenly I found myself without siblings and alone and isolated. I began self medicating with marijuana. Shout out to that guy back there. um, and it was actually a really good escape for me. And so the years were going by, and it really I started running away, and there was a lot of fights at home, and things really actually came to a head after my eighth grade year when I was arrested for, you ready? Car theft, obstruction of a police officer, a personal property paraphernalia, and about four other things that had sent me to a juvenile detention center. And while that might have sounded scary, actually, it took a couple of nights in the detention center for me to realize that it was actually quite peaceful. And I was eating three times a day, and there were snacks in between. And I also knew where I was sleeping every night. It's kind of nice. And I also realized that a lot of the other inmates who were all black were getting sent upstate. This was in East St. Louis. So they were getting sent upstate to Chicago for things like truancy and fighting. So I knew that with my felonies, or thought with my felonies, I would be getting quite a bid. So you can imagine how surprising it was for me to go in front of the judge. And the sentiment between the judge and caseworkers and lawyers was that prison was no place for a little white girl like me, as if it's a place for somebody. And I was actually given an alternative sentence of rehab and ultimately was sent back home. And this was actually not good for me. First of all, I'm getting out early, so people think I'm a narc, and I also felt guilty, and I didn't know what that guilty thing was, but I did feel like some sort of survivor's guilt, like I wasn't supposed to have this thing. Things went back to normal. Still hiding in the bathroom stall at school so people didn't know I wasn't eating lunch. Still running away, still fighting. It was really chaotic. And I really realized also at the same time that I could sleep with men and eat their food and stay at their house. And it was becoming quite apparent that if I continued down the way that I was going, that I was going to end up dead. And I thought that maybe prison would actually save me. So I had to figure out how I can actually get back in there. And so I worked my way, and failing enough piss tests and getting in front of the judge enough that he was finally tired of it, that he gave me the sentence. And so I was 16 when I was ultimately sentenced to my 21st birthday in juvenile prison. It was actually nice for me. It was what I wanted. So I get sent to Chicago. And of course, the place in Chicago is so far from St. Louis that my mom really had a difficult time coming there. There's no public transit options. So we become detached. And at the same time, I actually start becoming really close with a lot of the inmates, and a place with girls, full of girls, full of from broken homes. I felt I had finally found my tribe, and we had bonded over a lot of things, and we looked out for each other. And I wasn't actually close with any of my family. So this was actually the first, not only time where I was in a stable environment, but the time that I actually had like really tight friends. And I was there for about a year and some change before my counselor calls me in and tells me my parents have been deemed unfit. I'll be getting paroled to a group home. And this is actually a relief for me. At the same time, I'm thinking, why didn't anybody look into that before? We could have skipped prison if they would have just looked at that before. So right after I got this news, I realized a lot of my prison sisters were pulling away from me. And I was really confused about this because a lot of my peers had also been waiting for group homes, and we knew that it would take 6 months to a year. Like I said, this is the super predator era. We're overcrowded in the prisons. So it takes, that time, at least a year at least, to get a bed that opens. And so I did some digging around, and one of my friends was like, "Look, you're white. You're getting out sooner than us. It's not going to take you as long." And they were really right. It was within a couple of weeks that I was actually being transferred to a group home with two other white girls who had actually been in so many fights they should have got extra time. And this was like devastating for me. I wanted to sabotage this, but I knew I couldn't do this out of respect to my friends who had been waiting that long. And as a condition of parole, you can't contact parolees or delinquents. So I knew that I was going to lose all the tight relationships that I had, and I was going to, again, be isolated. But I had to do it. So I go to the group home and I become severely depressed and am on all these antidepressants and, a slew of other things that psychiatrists give kids in group homes. And um, I'm there. I finally get on. It's another year and some more change where I'm getting on and getting into the independent living program, that my parole officer calls me in and says he has great news that a lot of it due to overcrowding, that new laws in Illinois have changed back the release date from 21 to 19. And within 8 months, I'll be emancipated. Yes, emancipation is what they call it when they let you out of the system. This was not good news for me because at this time, I was so detached from my family and had lost my prison sisters that I knew within 8 months, when I turned 19, I will no longer have any caseworkers, parole officers, or anybody checking up on me that I had before. And it was really devastating. Like, I was like, shit, I'm going to be on my own again. So I did what I did best and failed more piss tests until finally the parole officer had enough and sent me back to jail. And I was relieved to go back and like back to my sanctuary, how I feel as it was today. Still, it was a sanctuary, and I got to live there for a few more months until I was ultimately emancipated at the age of 19 and sent back to East St. Louis with a trash bag containing everything I owned. And going back, it wasn't the same as it used to be. There wasn't these fights and arguments, but I was detached and I didn't belong, and really my prime goal was to get back to with my prison sisters, with my real family. So I started selling drugs and to make enough money to go back to one of the towns that they were living in. And I succeeded and I got there. And it was upon getting there that I realized a lot of them were actually cycling back in to adult institutions. And it was really by the grace of finding a mentor who did for me what a lot of your parents probably have done for you, by holding you accountable, by being a responsible adult, by being a role model, by showing you how things are supposed to go. She did that for me, this mentor. And it really enabled me to actually break the chains of recidivism and go to college. And, I did graduate. I moved to New York, started traveling the world. And it has been in this last decade since then that I had one eye cocked toward the system. I felt a responsibility towards it, but I was really terrified to come close to it because I feel like the system is a vacuum. And if you get too close, it might suck you back in. And so I thought maybe I could do it through the safety of writing. I could write about white privilege. I could write about like the negative things that come from it on both sides of the coin. And it was through this writing, through incarcerated teens actually, that invited me to start speaking to kids that are in institutions and Rikers. And I realized in that room that I really am supposed to be aggressively be the mentor that I only found by luck. And that's what informs my work today. And really, as a side note, that's actually how I met Rob and Corey and Kathy and all these people. And once again, I found my tribe. So thank you.